Hi there, I'm James Osborne, the co-founder of the Recruitment Network, and welcome to Recruitment TV. The place where we bring you the conversations, the ideas and insights shaping the future of recruitment right now. In each episode, we'll go behind the scenes with leaders building exceptional recruitment businesses, uncovering the decisions, the challenges and the strategies that are driving real growth. Recruitment TV explores the people and ideas moving the industry forward right now. Brought to you by the Recruitment Network, we're here to share the knowledge, experiences and inspiration that help recruitment businesses succeed in today's evolving world. So let's get started with this episode of Recruitment TV. Right, well, fantastic. Thank you for joining us today on today's podcast. It's part of our super agency series where we're talking about what is it that makes a recruitment super agency. So those recruitment organizations that are really accelerating fast, they're growing, they seem to be really capturing market share right now as much as anything else. And today's sort of sub-theme is what we're referring to as the automated agency, and in particular an AI native recruitment agency, what they actually look like and what does that actually mean in these days. And I think there's a big shift going on at the moment. I think we're seeing it across the sector. We have seen it happening for the last couple of years, really. When it comes to technology and how we're using technology in recruitment, and I think that shift is looking at how do we move from those systems that traditionally were just storing data for us are now far more intelligent. That seem to be doing things that actually work and push the needle a little bit, which I think is interesting. And I think for me, that's a very natural super agency conversation, that gap between agencies using AI as a feature and agencies that have actually really rebuilt their workflows around AI and technology in particular, and what's coming down the pipe still as well. And I think there's one business that can really speak credibly about this, what this might look like in practice. And that's the guys from Spott, who I want to pick their brains today a little bit around things around automated outreach and AI matching and eliminating all that admin stuff that we're sort of quite used to or have been used to in the past. And also at the same time, looking at things like pipeline predictability and so on and so forth. So to help me with all this type of stuff, I brought someone who's far more technologically knowledgeable than I am. I can't even speak today, I don't think. And that's Lander Degrève, who's the co-founder of Spott. And if you're not familiar with Spott, it's an AI native ATS and CRM system. So Lander, firstly, thank you for joining us today. How are things? How are you?
Thank you, James, for the beautiful introduction. I'm doing great.
Good, fantastic. Well, let's get straight into it, Lander, because there's so much we can talk about here, and I don't know where this conversation is going to take us, to be honest with you. But I suppose if I start with the basic one, I think everyone is sort of saying at the moment they're using AI. I've just come off the back of one of our traction programs, which is our sort of AI agent building program that we run for the members here at TRN. I question how many people are actually really using AI. So when we talk about an AI native recruitment company, what does that actually look like in practice? And how is that sort of, I suppose, fundamentally different from a traditional recruitment company that we've sort of been used to?
Yeah, I think there's definitely different gradations of how intensively everyone's using AI. It goes from very simple, I'm using a ChatGPT license to help me draft individual emails from the start, to I'm building my own API integrations, sort of like setting up my own backend the way I like to do things. And that's sort of like a big stretch that we're seeing in the market right now, from people that are doing very simple things to very complex things. So there's definitely a spectrum of where the agencies sit, basically. From the technology perspective, I'd say there's the simpler part. They're sort of like using the tools that are layered on top of their current systems to help them make a certain workflow like that of a bit easier, but nothing's really happening for them automatically still. I think at the other end of the spectrum, that's where you're seeing like complete end-to-end workflows being tied together with like AI agents everywhere. And I think that's sort of like the edge of the market where everyone's moving now. The fastest moving agencies are going in that direction where everything is being driven sort of like with AI in the loop.
Okay, brilliant. And if you were to look at a typical recruiter or recruitment company, let's say you're going to sit in their office for the day and shadow them, what would you say are some of the biggest I'm going to say time drains, but also archaic processes that they really shouldn't be doing anymore, or that shouldn't exist anymore, that maybe were the obvious stuff that we used to do 2 years ago?
I think my answer would differ today from what I would have said 6 months ago. I think what I was seeing a lot 6 months ago is just the huge amounts of manual data entry that were happening into every system. An email that's being sent, a LinkedIn message that's being sent, or I'm jumping off of a call. you would always be jumping back into the system, adding these in as nodes, moving people from stage to stage, trying to follow that up. And that was just this manual data entry process that was taking away hours and hours of your time, like on a daily basis. I think since then, I think the market has already moved up quite a bit, where we're seeing sort of note takers now available everywhere. I think most systems are actually coming to the level where this data entry process has already gotten a lot smoother. I think especially for like the average agency. And now where you see where the new bottleneck is coming is sort of, okay, what are we doing with that data? How is my system helping me to sort of like remember what my next steps are, driving my next to-dos, especially sort of like these follow-ups, I think sending out emails, sending out messages, that is still happening very manually. Even though we're using AI already to draft the messages, we're not completely trusting it to sort of like send out, and that's now becoming the bottleneck. So shifting away a bit from data entry to actually actioning on top of that and doing things with it, I think that's where now the biggest bottleneck is.
And you touched on a really interesting word there, which is trust. Do you think people will ever fully trust AI? I mean, I think that's a big question mark at the moment, and why some people are slow to adopt AI is that trust factor.
Definitely. And I think you'd build trust over time, like humans to humans do. And I think the same happens with humans to AI. If I look back like 12 months when we were building Spott, hallucination was like a big issue with like the smaller models that we were working with at the time. And they were obviously making mistakes every now and then, and regularly as well. I think also with the improvement that we've seen, sort of like the big large language models, the frequency of these mistakes is going down. And also the systems are putting in place more and more guardrails to make sure that these issues don't happen or don't occur. And I think it's a natural transition where you go from drafting your emails to be able to preview them. And once you've previewed 50, 80, 100 of them and the system learns from the way you like to do things, the chance of errors is significantly dropping and getting so low to the point where you start trusting AI and you're not double checking again every transcript. Did everything get written down correctly? You start trusting that. And I think with the improvement of the models and over time, I think it's a very natural process where we're already way further now than we were 9 to 12 months ago.
Yeah, and I think this is going to continuously evolve and play out, right? I mean, and you probably know more than anyone else, but who knows what this is going to look like in 2 or 3 years' time? I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? Have you got any predictions about where you think AI is going?
Big predictions. I think for agencies specifically, I think the AI, obviously they will get smarter, they will get more accurate, and that's obviously allowing us on the software side to do more tailored flows more accurately. And I think that's also the way we should see it. If a normal recruiter was doing, say, 80% logistics and 20% judgment a year or 2 years back, I think that is sort of like a ratio that completely inverts, where everything admin-wise you were talking about, James, can and will be handled by AI over time. There's just so many different things to do and to bolt together that, for me, the super agency, as you're referring to it, you're basically going to have your best recruiters spending 80%, 90% of their time on making the right judgment calls here and there, and having everything else handled sort of like by AI the way that they like to do it, when it's purely like logistics and then like scheduling an interview, finding out what is the right date. That's not where like the recruiter is adding value. It's in the depth of their relationships. And I think that's what AI is going to unlock for sure.
Okay, brilliant. And I think you touched on, again, a really valid point about the depth of relationships that we're having. And I think, I've always said, and hopefully I'm going to be right for this for the right reason, is that AI coming into our industry is actually humanizing the recruitment process, because it frees us up to spend more time in front of the customers, in front of candidates, and doing the personal stuff, which actually is, we've been proving, is more and more important now than it's ever been before, right? So
yeah, 100%. And I think we also see that in numbers. If you look at, everyone's using outreach tools, for instance, but as the volume is sort of increasing and everyone starts doing that, obviously your reply rates are going down. And that's sort of like, again, where this human element is becoming so much more important. You want to talk to a recruiter that understands who you are, what you care about, and the depth of that relationship is what's going to have them come back to you, whether it's as a contractor or as an individual. If they're looking for a new job 3 years down the road, they're going to come back to you because you're that person for them. And that's going to be so much more important now than it was in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. The when we talk a lot about AI in systems and in CRMs and things, a lot of it is about the administration side. So it's like scheduling and moving and identifying and researching and that sort of stuff, which is all well and good and very good. The bit I'm interested in now is around the sort of the sales side of the systems.
Yes.
And the sales side of AI, really, because there's a really interesting relationship, isn't there, between sales and AI, and what works and what doesn't work, what bastardizes and ruins sales processes because AI is doing the wrong thing, and etc. Just tell me a little bit about the relationship between AI and sales, would you say?
Yeah, I think one of the things that will obviously already cost a lot of time today in terms of business development is just sourcing for new opportunities. Like, where do you start searching? It's all over the internet. Where is my specific expertise as a company? I might have just placed a great candidate at a company, and the next logical step should be, all right, where can I find more of these candidates and where can I find more of these similar clients out on the internet? And that's a task that's just extremely time consuming to figure out what's the right industry I'm targeting, what's the right company size, what's sort of like the marketplace like, or what's the space like in this market. Going through all of these, validating whether it's a fit for you, yes or no, and then identifying which context you can reach out to and how you should position your agency towards them. These are things that previously weren't possible. And I think that's already something you're seeing now with AI. People are scraping huge parts of the internet, coming back with very hot, very sharp leads. These are the 5-6 people that you should reach out to with this messaging because you placed this candidate. And from there on out, I think that's again where the human judgment takes over. Do we agree? Yes or no? But it's sort of like you have some junior digital worker doing all of the grunt work for you, and they're coming back with highly curated sort of results. And it's your job within these 20 high priority opportunities, which is the right one, which is the one I'm going to pursue. And just that alone is cutting a huge amount of time. And if it's then on how do I craft my outreach message, how am I going to jump on that cow, how am I going to position yourself, that stays in the hands of the recruiter. And I think that's also where the sales process is being made. Mm-hmm. But all sort of like that grunt work again, it's not fully admin as you describe it. I think you're still doing the prep work. I think also that can shift towards AI and help you to be much more productive there on that front.
Okay, interesting. So where do you see AI stopping in the recruitment process? As in, as in the sense of not stopping as in failing, but as in stopping in the sense of we shouldn't be using AI here. This needs to remain human. And
yeah, I think definitely the final cut. Am I going to present this candidate to this client? Do we think they're a good match? Yes or no? Do I want to work for this client in the first place? I think there's always going to be this element where you're hiring a person, you're placing them also with a hiring manager who's a person. There needs to be sort of like this click in terms of personalities. And I think those are like the small items that AI will not be good at reading either today. And I think also not like a year or 2 years time from now, because the patterns are so subtle and so human that it's not something that you can sort of like abstract with technology. I think you can make it a whole lot smarter. And I think the full thing about the AI is supporting sort of like where humans fall short. If I'm running 100 candidates in parallel, I need to remember so many to-dos. And I think that's where the AI should help you sort of like remember, what is it that I'm following up on today? Oh, this candidate, what was the last thing we discussed? It should help you remember. And then the human makes a judgment. Am I going to bring this, the fact that they were on holidays last week, am I going to bring this back up? And that's going to like strike a chord. And that's what sort of like ties you to the candidate or ties you to the contact. And that's sort of like where the cutoff point should be.
That's right. And if you think about how many times we all recruited people where all the data says no, but my gut feel just felt right, and we took them on and they were absolutely brilliant. How many times we've done that and they failed miserably as well, by the way? So probably just as many. But but that's the power of a great recruiter, right? They just know their market, they know their candidate, they know what's going to work. So I don't think AI will ever be able to replace that component. So
yeah, one of these things is always like matching. For instance, we can match people's experiences and everything they've ever said over an email or over a WhatsApp message and link that to jobs. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like you're always looking for this gem, right? Who is the right person for a role where you think it doesn't look like it at face value, but they might be the perfect fit. And I think that's not something that's going to be solved anytime soon with the help of AI. And that's where the human element is so important.
So big news, the Recruitment Network and Atlas are now officially partnering, and we're kicking it off with a bang. Atlas just launched this MCP integration with Claude. For recruiters, it means everything you've said, written, heard, or read is now instantly retrievable just by asking in plain English. No more digging through your CRM to find what you logged months ago. Who are my top 10 clients based on revenue? And did they mention anything about their hiring plans over the next 6 months? Answered in seconds. This is exactly the kind of innovation we want to bring to the TRM community. Technology that takes admin off your plate so you can focus on what you do best, building relationships and making placements. Recruiters in our network, this one is worth a look. Have a look at recruitwithatlas.com.
Are you excited by the idea that recruiters or recruitment companies have the ability to build their own AI and their own technology? Because I mean, if you think about the ability now of a recruiter to be a developer or anyone to be a developer overnight sort of stuff, or a would-be developer overnight, that gets people really thinking about what their tech stack looks like, what it could look like, how far they could take it. What's your general thoughts? Because obviously the CRM and the ATS sits at the heart of the conversation. That's your single source of truth. But around that, people are building lots of things at the moment.
Yeah, and I actually strongly encourage that as well, because at Spott, for me, we also see Spott as sort of like, we're your infrastructure, your service layer. You want something at the core that's robust, but which is going to function and always be up for you. And you want to reach all that data through your APIs. And I think that's what we see today, whether it's through MCP or using Claude Code to call our APIs. They have got some sort of strategy. They believe this is sort of like my winning mix. This is the thing that's unique to me. And I want to be able to build that on the side and experiment with new things, new ideas. But I need a system that I can call with. And I think this is like a great way of sort of like thinking about your business. If you see efficiency gains, you're now completely free to sort of like start hacking something together, see if that works or not. And I think the big issue in the past was obviously you weren't you didn't have the technical capabilities to do so, but that's been solved. But you also need a system that allows you to sort of like get all the data out and put data back in to fit your workflow. And I think that's exactly how the next generation of sort of platforms also should be built. We need to be maximally open so that we actually enable anyone to do anything they want with technology on top of that, and sort of have this symbiosis between the two.
It's interesting. I mean, again, on the traction course a second ago, I just showed a bunch of people how to plug in Claude into your inbox and get it sort of assessing and reviewing your sent items and identifying ones people haven't replied to you for a while, and look at your calendar and give you all this intelligent type piece from Claude. And it is incredible when people look at it and go, actually, the power of this is amazing when you use it properly. But there's always that fear factor around data and protection and security. So if you've got a bunch of recruiters or amateur tech builders, which I think we all probably are, probably apart from yourself, we all probably are, building and playing with stuff, are we at risk now with sort of there's data all over the place? We've got issues with GDPR, the security's got an issue, etc. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think definitely you need to be careful now. I think as an agency under GDPR, if you have a valid reason to have them in your sort of like to control their data because you're trying to actually place them and recruit them, I think you're always going to be in the clear. But obviously, if you're connecting Claude to your Outlook and they're looking into emails from 10 years ago, these people might no longer actually want you to access that data, or they want you to delete that, which Outlook isn't going to be doing for you. And that's something, again, that's for me like more part of the platforms that you run on. That's something that we also do, is like we're enforcing the rules on whose consent has been expired. Can we still access these details through API, yes or no? And that's sort of like your defense layer. And I think that's also the right way to think about it. You need like a core, a defense layer, like a harness sort of. And on the sides, you can do whatever you like. And I think at the moment, not everything will be 100%, but I think also the regulatory frameworks for that aren't super well developed yet, because it's such a thin line for GDPR in recruitment. We're obviously all trying to get the best out of there for our candidates, but at the same time, an LLM might be reading a couple emails that they shouldn't have had access to. And I don't think anyone is in the danger zone. There is definitely something to be cautious of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, luckily, things like Claude, for example, it doesn't write the email response. It drafts it and then sticks it in your draft, and you can decide whether you want to send it. So there is a level of control, right, which is obviously important.
There definitely is. I think if you're going to the biggest agencies in the world, I don't think they would accept it. I think that's also where you see like outside of recruitment, like the enterprise level ChatGPT, Claude adoption is very slow because of all these data concerns. And I think that's something that will also get resolved over time. But I think now it's like a very acute thing. People should be aware of it, like consciously, that you can't just give access to everything, start publishing it everywhere. That's obviously going to be a GDPR violation.
No, for sure. Could you give me some examples, Lander, of organizations that you work with, recruitment companies that you work with, where they've brought in Spott and it's really made a difference to their... it's less about the nice stuff, and don't take this the wrong way. So I don't really care too much about if it's a nice system and it feels good and we're a bit more productive. Have you got any hard numbers or examples of where productivity has actually improved or profitability has improved in a recruitment company because of they're using this AI-driven workflow, AI-driven system?
Yeah, I can't give super exact numbers because all of these are protected in our T's and C's and DPAs. But generally, the average numbers that we see is at least 40% productivity increase in terms of sort of measuring tasks, how long did they take versus how much do we do today. And I think we all know that recruiting is sort of like a big funnel. If you throw 100 units in at the top, you're for sure going to get 2 to 4 out at the bottom. So that's sort of also the numbers that we see in the placements. And I think where the efficiency gains are made very, very wildly between different agencies, because some of them have very different ways of working. Either you're super BD focused, you've got a ton of inbounds, and you're just trying to like match fast and get them out, push them onto your client portal as fast as possible. You've got exec search, where it's much more important sort of like to be able to surface the right candidates, present them in the right way, in the right way. So where the value is being created can vary very wildly between the agencies. But generally, for me, the platform is doing a great job if you're actually spending the least amount of time in the platform. And that's also what we're seeing, where rather than spending 2-3 hours a day in your ATS, you're actually closer to an hour and a half, because everything else is happening for you. And that's sort of the numbers that we see.
Yeah, well, and they're important numbers. But I think then it comes to the next question, which we ask and we talk a lot about from a strategic point of view, is if I gave a recruiter 40% of their time back, what are they going to do with that time? And that's a really important question, because there's no point giving a recruiter 40% of their time back for them to find other things to do that don't actually make a difference. So, if they're using that time and they're more productive to go and spend more time in front of customers, and so, then great. But that leads to a whole load of new questions then, like, do we have the right people in our businesses who actually want to spend more time in front of customers? Mm-hmm. Were they actually happier doing recruitment administration rather than maybe more of the sales side of recruitment? It's an interesting challenge for recruitment leaders, I think, as they go through this journey, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also completely depends on what your agency is doing specifically. I think the most logical thing everyone thinks about is, okay, I'm going to invest more like on my BD side. I'm going to be sourcing for new opportunities, reach out for speculative campaigns. I think that's the number one go-to. But at the same time, I think there's also a lot of value in just catching up more frequently with your contractors, making sure like deepening that relationship that we were talking about. For instance, working on your brand, I think, is also super important these days. Like, everyone's reaching out, doing like these mass bullet campaigns. Your reply rates are decreasing. Why would people come to you? It's because you've got a great brand. People love to work with you. These are things that maybe were always sort of like on the back burner, and things you want to invest time in now. So where you funnel that extra 40% of your time, I think, is completely up to you. And what I see people doing as well is they just take the time that they gain to sort of experiment with Claude, and they're trying to link up their billing engine or their Zero accounts directly to Spott's APIs, for instance. And that's also driving value for the business in a different direction. So there's a wide range of options to sort of like get that time well spent, basically.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Obviously, if you've got businesses who are bringing in Spott or AI, for that matter, full stop into their business, there's always that question mark around adoption, because, well, as we know, not everybody adopts, and it does require a bit of a mindset shift, I think, for some of these businesses. What would you suggest people should do to get better adoption through their systems and through using AI and etc., just out of their people?
I actually believe it's not necessarily the responsibility of sort of like the agency to drive AI adoption in that sense. I think it's more the platform's job to make it seamless and to encourage people to sort of try and test out and make it embedded into their workflow. So you don't want it to be too invasive and have suddenly everything happening with AI without any explainability. But if you bring it into the right UI, UX flow, you should sort of be able to spot where people are struggling and then add a convenient button somewhere like, oh, should I help you draft this email maybe? And that's sort of, I think, how they get in touch with AI and how you actually do drive adoption just by funneling them through the platform in a nice way. Inside of the agency itself, and I think that's what we even do at Spott, is for our people that are non-technical, we do almost bi-monthly sort of technical primers, and we just run them through what are all the options today, how do we use Claude, and we go from very simple examples in operations to the most complex, which is our engineers. Obviously, we're completely maxed out, and we just teach people, this is how we use things, this is what you can achieve, and encourage them to also test that out and like take a bit of a time frame there. And you see that works really well. People are spending time sort of like optimizing repeatable workflows. They notice, oh, I could make a skill for this, and they do so. So I think you can approach it both ways, but for a recruiter, I think the platform should be sort of like the first step in driving adoption itself.
Okay. All right, brilliant. Let's we're coming towards a close, and I want to sort of keep looking forward as much as anything else. If you were to fast forward, and I'll go 2030, but that feels like miles away based on how fast things are changing and moving.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's a hell of a long time. But if you fast forward to 2030, what do you think recruiters would look back on and laugh that they were spending hours doing every week manually now, that in 2030 they're going, what on earth were we up to?
I think for me, the biggest thing is, and I'm also a victim of that myself, I write everything down on paper in terms of what do I need to do? What did someone say to help me remember for the next conversation? And I think especially for recruiters, you're seeing so many different faces. It's impossible. You can pretend to, but it's impossible to remember every single detail that was discussed for you. For me, I think the 2030 or even the 2027 scenario is you wake up and you arrive on Monday morning and your AI recruiting companion has sort of like gone through everything, and they're surfacing you with a list of, I want to do X, Y, and Z today. I've drafted these emails for you. I suggest you to take a look at this. They ordered by priority, and you're only doing the judgment there. Yes, no, or how are we going to tweak and move forward? And the fact that today, every morning, I'm this person that puts like their to-dos in my Outlook as sort of calendar blocks. And that's sort of like how I operate. I don't try to remember because I know I'm going to forget. And I'm just looking at my task list, or I'm looking at my OneNote, like what are the things I need to do? And to me, that's almost crazy that we're still doing that, because AI would be perfectly capable of doing so. And I think that's the number one thing people might say, wow, I don't need to remember anything. I just need to be myself, present my best version, and work off of that.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I still use a pen and whatever, and I still record on Fathom, and I still record everything at the same time. And I'm just like, well, there's no point. But it's my comfort blanket.
It's maybe to your trust point as well. Like, do you really trust your note taker to get to all your to-dos, extract them, put them in the system? Even I'm not there yet, and I would consider myself indeed already quite in favor of the AI adoption wave. But that's, I think, it's a big gap, because you don't want to miss out on something important. And but I think that's like the number one thing that will change if the confidence grows high enough.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of every day, I still get my camera out, take a photograph of what I've written down, and get AI to then write it into notes. I mean, like, who knows what's going on, right? But yeah, okay. Listen, Lander, really, really fascinating. Thank you. I sort of got a final question to sort of finish on. In the next 30 days, it's the UK summer here at the moment. It's over the summer. If anyone listening on this call today, or on this session, we're trying to move towards becoming more of an AI native agency. What's the one thing, or the one or two things that you would suggest that they would do first, just to go on that journey and get going with this?
Assuming that they've used AI before, or completely new to it?
Well, I think the reality is a lot of people have used AI, but they're not really using AI.
I think looking at your own process is the very first step. I think if you're in ChatGPT using to draft your emails, but you find yourself sort of like dragging CVs back and forth to share the context, let's say, on what you're trying to achieve, there might be 4 or 5 of these things, including your note taker as well. I think probably everyone's using them already, that's where you'll realize like this is where the friction is currently. I've taken away some admin to do the note taking, but now I'm copy pasting the notes everywhere to sort of like keep everything in sync. And I think if you realize that where the friction points are, I think you're already quite well equipped to go and evaluate platforms like, is this really doing for me, or is this going to solve for me these kind of issue points? And there's these days a lot of fantastic AI features out in the market, completely different depending on what kind of agency you are. You might get a lot of value in from your matching or from your campaigns. And I think you need to zero in on which is the one thing that I spend 40% of my time off, and then go and explore in the market what's possible these days and how does it fit into my workflow. That's what people always forget, or they don't think about it too much until after the fact. How does it fit into my workflow? And if you understand how AI is working, you can evaluate those things. I think you're in a great position to make a good choice there. But getting started, ChatGPT, understanding what's going wrong, where the friction points are, I think that's the number one place to start.
Brilliant. That's really useful. Thank you. And certainly the companies and the super agencies that we're working with, we take them through a thing called Project Automate, which basically almost like maps out their entire workflows or recruitment business, almost like on paper. It's not on paper, but in the sense of, let's not build anything yet. Let's just work out what your actual workflows look like, because in many cases, your workflows might not be right in the first place. There's no point building AI to do a workflow that's broken in the first place. It doesn't make any sense, right?
I was about to say, many people adjust their workflows to the system that they've bought 20 years ago. And sometimes you see that there's a lot of things there that aren't quite right or could run more efficiently. So rethinking the workflow alone is already is a big first step as well.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
How can you run more efficiently? Again, AI play a role.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So listen, Lander, really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us. If anyone wants to reach out and find out more about Spott and what you guys do, what's the best way of doing so?
Anywhere. You can reach us on LinkedIn. You can reach me personally through the websites. We'll always make sure you get in touch with the right person on our side. So we're present on all the main channels.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Lander. So I hope everyone's enjoyed this session today. I mean, this is, again, part of what we're talking about, these super agencies, recruitment companies that are just figuring this out, moving forward, getting pace, getting market share, picking up some traction. We're seeing a lot of those across the TRN community right now, which is great. And we're really trying to distill down what are they doing differently. And and the AI journey is part of that now, without a shadow of a doubt. But it's not replacing the recruiters. It's freeing the recruiters up to do more of the stuff that makes the biggest difference. So Lander, Spott, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for everyone listening today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one coming up soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.